is Andrik Cordero. I'm a financial advisor and the founder of Grow With Me, a full-service investment advisory firm. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about all things related to the CFA designation. So whether you're a CFA candidate and pursuing the CFA designation, or you are considering pursuing the CFA charter holder, this video is for you. So the CFA designation stands for Chartered Financial Analyst. It is one of the top investment credentials recognized globally. It's given by the CFA Institute. There is 178,000 charter holders worldwide. And I say worldwide because the CFA charter holder is recognized globally. And that's pretty important to kind of note, is that if we compare that to a lot of other credentials that are given, a lot of other credentials are, maybe recognized on a national level, but not recognized on a global level. The CFA designation actually is, not only is it recognized globally, there are 165 waivers for different credentials, certifications, different testing, different things that the CFA designation allows you to bypass by being a CFA charter holder, which is pretty astounding, right? So it gives you a shortcut to a lot of different paths, which, and later in this video, as we talk about comparisons about should you become a CFA charter holder over something else, that's a pretty relevant topic. So then we look and we say, this really ultra prestigious designation, but there's so many people I'm sure that you have talked to, friends and family, or client prospects, something in the workforce, and people don't know what the CFA designation is. It's the biggest deal you've never heard of. It's kind of interesting. Does that mean the CFA designation is worthless? Certainly not. Now, just because something isn't known doesn't necessarily mean that it's not relevant or you shouldn't consider pursuing it. And if something might not be known, maybe it might not be as known from a marketing perspective, right? But it depends on what you want to pursue the designation for, or what your reasons are for pursuing the designation. Obtaining the CFA designation is extremely difficult. On average, it takes people about 4 years. There are a series of requirements, but the biggest one being passing the 3 CFA exams, level 1, 2, and 3. Those are really the big hurdles to trying to become a CFA charter holder, and those are extremely hard. The pass rates over the years have only gone down and down and down. So pass rates vary for each level. We're seeing pass rates on some of the levels, recently as low as in the 20s, about 20%, 20%-ish, and that's pretty abysmal, right? So it just is a testimony to how hard it is. Now, if we combine very low pass rates and 178,000 charter holders worldwide, we can quickly see that that number isn't very big, right? So there's over 600,000 CPAs, and there are at least 100,000 MBAs that are being, given out every year, right? So just the sheer volume of those credentials, there's just so many more of those given out. So it makes sense that the public, at least in America, is going to be very, very familiar with those credentials. Now, what does this all mean for pay or career paths? According to the CFA Institute, typical career paths for a CFA charter holder include portfolio management, research, consulting, risk analysis, asset management, private wealth management, commercial banking, investment banking, insurance. And then there's also other areas which would include, data science, credit analysis, chief investment officer, being a trader, working in the fintech space. So there are a lot of different career fields in finance that would be relatable to being a CFA charter holder. However, as you can see, they're all very specialized career fields that I just listed, right? The average pay for a CFA charter holder, according to the CFA Institute, is $126,000 annually. And they preface this and say, hey, this is base salary. So this isn't your total salary, or total compensation, I should say. And they say, with total compensation, the average portfolio manager that's a charter holder is $177,000, which goes to show CFA charter holders are obviously pretty well paid. Now, this is specifying as a portfolio manager, right? So if you have a different job as a risk analyst, or you're a chief investment officer, those average wages are obviously going to be very different. Now, what about just the knowledge about becoming a CFA charter holder? Well, this is where I'm very impressed with the CFA Institute. Is the CFA designation is very practical based. So each level consists of about 3,000 pages in curriculum, right? So that's a whopping 10,000 pages of material if you look at all three levels combined. And the CFA Institute provides all these books as being part of the complementary piece of registering for an exam. So you don't necessarily have to hire outside test prep providers if you don't want to. Unlike a lot of credentials that you might pursue, credential, you want to let's say you want to get a Series 7, or you want to become a CFP. Well, they don't provide you and say, here's the knowledge base to study. It's really just kind of go out and find it yourself. There's topics that they give you, but ultimately you're basically forced to have a test prep provider. You can't really study for those exams with, registering for the exam and then boom, there you are, there's all the test prep material to study for. And this is where I think the CFA Institute does a tremendously great job, is that they provide candidates and say, hey, look, this is all this curriculum, this is all this body of knowledge that we deem important that you should know. And it's always changing. So to give you an example of some of the recent changes that have been made, there's actually been a change or revision in adding fintech, and there's also been an addition to adding some cryptocurrency or crypto technology in the curriculum, right? And this just goes to show you how cutting edge or how leading, the CFA Institute tries to be, right? Rather than just saying, here's 3 static exams, pass these exams year over year, they're looking at the industry trends, they're looking at what's going on, and then they're updating that knowledge base to make sure that candidates are staying very relevant with what's going on. And that's where I want to point out, a reason for maybe pursuing the CFA designation. So there's a lot of people that want to pursue the CFA designation because they want to become better investors. They want to become more educated. Is this the right program for you in that case? Well, one of the pieces that the CFA Institute really harps on is that being a CFA charter holder does not indicate that you're a better investor, because investing is really an art, and part art, part science. To give a quick example, let's say we're talking about the state of the economy today, right? We have inflationary pressures, and we also have a huge debt burden that's been created in the U.S. economy. So if interest rates go up, then we're increasing that debt service, the burden of that. And we also have the inflationary pressure. So will the economy go up, go down? Well, you might have the logic, and you might be able to apply certain tools in the CFA curriculum into that real world example. And so you can apply these tools, but that doesn't give you the answer in saying we're going up or going down. But it gives you a really great framework to be able to break down a problem, make sense of it, articulate that, and kind of quantify that, make a repeatable process, right? I personally think becoming a CFA charter holder has vastly enhanced, my just overall knowledge base, my skill set, my tool base when it comes to investing. Do I use all the things in investing? No, I don't use all the things that I've learned in the CFA curriculum for day-to-day investing. There's some really specialized topics in the CFA curriculum that you may never use in your investing career. However, by having a good knowledge base in it, it does give you a bigger, broader scope of what's going on in the investment universe, at least for me personally. So you might not be participating in buying and selling swaps contracts, but by understanding kind of some of the mathematics and the arbitrage principles of what's going on there, you now have just a deeper understanding of what's going on with the global, financial ecosystem, which is just a positive thing. Now, if you have a specific style of investing, right, you may not be relevant, but it is good knowledge. Okay, so now you're decided, hey, you want to become a CFA candidate. Well, what can you expect? First things first, do you need test prep material? As I said before, the CFA Institute provides, all the information you need to pass the exams. Now, whether you may want to have test prep providers, that's a different story. There's, I want to say, over 40 different test prep providers out there, so you have a lot of choices, right? There are the really well-known ones, which is Kaplan, Schweizer. There's some really big names out there, and then there's all the little ones in between. I think test prep providers can certainly help. However, you also have to consider what are your financial constraints. So, do you have an employer paying for the test prep material, or are you coming out of pocket yourself? Personally, I was coming out of pocket for most all my CFA designation journey, and so I had to be a little smarter about, okay, where am I going to kind of allocate my resources or allocate my money in buying different things. There are also some scholarships out there that the CFA Institute has, and you might be able to get something like that for a test prep provider, but those are all considerations in the journey as you kind of go along. I'm not going to go into each level very deeply in this video, but I do want to kind of cover each level in brevity, right? So the CFA Level 1 exam is really a focus on covering just a lot of different financial concepts. So you're going to get a really good base, and I would say that's kind of like your bachelor's degree of finance or economics, accounting, all kind of mixed together in one. That's the CFA Level 1 exam. Right, so there's more questions on level 1 than there is level 2 and 3, and there's no vignettes, there's no stories, it's all multiple choice. And so you're really just trying to get all the different bases of concepts out. Level 2 is this soul crusher. That's where a lot of people kind of decide whether, hey, is the CFA designation for them, is it not for them? Because level 2 tends to be one of the hardest exams for CFA candidates that you find. It was personally the hardest level for me. It's very technical, and it's just different when you get into the vignettes and having to have this reading comprehension and then answer these problems. It was a new type of testing for me personally. Very difficult if you're just not accustomed to that, and I would say most people are not accustomed to that. Level 3 is a real focus on portfolio management. Level 3 says, hey, we already know you have good expertise about, finance in general. So now what we're going to do is we're going to expound, we're going to elaborate, we're going to give you some more tools, but then we're going to synthesize all this and bring it all back into, the relevancy of you as a professional person. The other thing is the mental barrier when you're on, or studying for level 3, you already know that it's not if you're going to become a CFA charter holder, it's when, because you're not going to give up at that point. Most people, the giving up stage is in level 1 or 2. It's not really so common in level 3. Okay, so now you're considering, is the CFA designation worth some other credential? So MBA. Should you become an MBA versus a CFA charter holder? Well, some of the key differences between those is an MBA is not standardized, right? So you can go to an Ivy League school or you can go to a no-name school. Those are two different names. So now you're having to figure out, is school reputability important for your job? And, the CFA designation is an equalizer. It's standardized. It's, you have a CFA, you're a CFA charter holder. It doesn't matter what investment firm you go to work for, where you go to work for, they know that is a standardized thing, which is really great because it can be an equalizer if you're not in a state or you don't have access to a school that's considered an Ivy League school or a prestigious name, and you're also spending a fraction of the cost, to become a CFA charter holder versus a MBA. Now, what are some other things, though, with, that we might want to compare, though, with an MBA is pay, right? Well, according to the CFA Institute, the average CFA designation, the salary is, or total compensation, I should say, according to them, is $180,000. They also say the average MBA is $107,000. So I don't know where they are citing or getting these sources of statistics. I'm going to say that sounds reasonably accurate. I mean, 107,000, 180,000. Well, what would be maybe some reasons? Well, the MBA it's generic, right? You can go into a management position and have an MBA, and that's relevant. That's kind of some of the history of MBAs was the idea was people were getting into these managerial positions and they didn't really have all the basic business management skills, so then let's create an MBA degree. So that's kind of how that came about. So you really can have some relevancy in a lot of different areas outside of kind of financy jobs, but that's also maybe a reason why you're getting paid less than a highly specialized credential like a CFA designation. The other thing is a poll done by the CFA Institute. It's about 90% of investment firms prefer having a CFA charter holder. There's a preference to wanting to hire a CFA charter holder, and they're also willing to pay a slight premium for CFA charter holders. So if you're going in for the same position, and you're an investment firm, you're going to probably want to hire the CFA charter holder and maybe pay them a little more than a non-CFA charter holder, just because there's that standardization. You know what you're getting. You're getting a specialist that has a specialist kind of set of tools, which that's what firms are doing. So then if we say, rather than an MBA, what about a math degree? What about an engineering degree or economics degree, an accounting degree, a master's in one of those versus CFA? Well, you kind of run back into the same issues or kind of the same pros and cons, just like an MBA, right? It's kind of similar. You're on this 2 to 3 year track to get one of those degrees. You also don't know how prestigious that school is, or I mean you do, but now you're kind of shopping for prestige. And a big part of shopping for prestige, if you think about it, colleges or universities, they all have access to the same textbooks, right? Like there's no magical textbooks that universities are pulling out. Now you might say, hey, there's a really prestigious professor that puts out a lot of research in a specific area, like Benjamin Graham, right? Warren Buffett's teacher. He taught at a university, right? Those are some really special lectures. You might have some unique experience like that potentially, but ultimately the textbooks are really the same thing that is going to be used at some other university, and you're paying a lot for that tuition, right? So if cost is an issue, that is an issue. Now, one of the upsides of a university structure is really the networking. That's kind of something that is really kind of subtly there, but that's actually one of the key things that you get from a university is that networking opportunities. And when I say networking, it could be the people in your class, it could be the alumni that graduated from there, it could be the university faculty. It's just there is a networking structure, and that is one of probably the really big selling points of getting a master's degree, maybe over a CFA designation. However, the CFA Institute does have a very strong, I would say, a very strong networking group for being a credential. So, if you are a CFA charter holder, you can participate in your local CFA society. So me personally, I participate in the CFA society in Nevada. So I participate in the local chapter. There's some really interesting, cool people that are in that chapter. Now, Nevada, there's just less CFA charter holders in Nevada than there maybe is in a big state like California or New York, because the financial sector is just smaller in Nevada. But there's no reason you couldn't necessarily tap into those other societies. So there is definitely networking that you can get out of becoming a CFA charter holder. But with universities, I would say that is one definitely selling point. Now let's talk about some credentials that are widely compared when you go head-to-head against the CFA designation, and that is the CPA or the CFP. Well, let's talk about the CPA. First, drum roll on what is the average salary of a CPA. It is $70,000. Wow. So compare that to the CFA designation, which is $180,000. And this is put out by the CFA Institute, so maybe that 70,000 number, maybe it's a little higher, maybe it's a little lower, but I'm going to say that's probably pretty accurate. And if we think about a credential and the difficulty being correlated to salary, I'm not going to necessarily, debate and say CPA is easier or harder, but passing the CPA exams is definitely much shorter on average than passing the CFA designation exams. So on average, CFA exams take candidates about 4 years. CPA exams, most people finish them definitely under 24 months, so under 2 months. I want to say people average definitely less than that on the time frame. Now, there are other requirements for both of these credentials, but the exams themselves are much quicker. Now, career paths as a CPA, they're also very different. So CPAs are dealing with numbers and money, but they're basically dealing with a different side of the face of money. CPA careers could be a financial manager, so you're talking corporate finance. CPA being an auditor, so financial, or just companies in general create financial statements. You need those statements verified and saying, hey, is this accurate? Is this right? Well, that's where a CPA comes in. Taxes, right? You have taxes. That is a common function of CPAs. However, people think of CPAs as the tax experts, and that's just part of what CPAs do. And they do these other things and also accounting work. Now, CPAs are obviously much more well-known than CFAs to the public, and there's over 600,000 CPAs, so it makes sense. And CPA is really an American designation. CFA is a global designation, so while there might be more CFAs in America than most other countries, CPA is really not relevant if you're in China. So it's a totally an American focused designation. So you have 3 times as many CPAs as you do CFA charter holders. CFP. CFP stands for Certified Financial Planner. CFP is widely known to the public in the financial planning space because I think the CFP, they've done a great job at marketing that credential to the public in the financial advising space. I personally run into a lot of people that are familiar with what the CFP is, and they're not familiar with what the CFA designation is. Oh yeah, I know what the CFP is. And that's where they've done a really good marketing job. Now let's look at actually like content of CFP. CFP is really broad-based financial planning, and it's like that's kind of nebulous. What does that mean? Well, that is tax strategies with trust, tax strategies in general, insurance strategies, cash flow, budgeting. There is an investment piece, but that's a very small part of the CFP curriculum. So you're not going to go through the CFP curriculum and become a investment manager expert. Definitely totally different style of curriculum. You're not going to say, oh, I know how to calculate free cash flow to equity and I'm comparing Apple to Google. It's not what CFPs do. You're focused as an advisor, but kind of looking at these big pictures. And the average CFP salary or compensation is, drum roll, $80,000. So much less than CFA designation of $180,000 once again. And if we look, the testing process for CFP, there's only one single test. Now there's other requirements to become a CFP. So it's not just the final exam. So there's technically like tests in between, and there's different pathways with becoming a CFP, but really everyone has to go through one test. And if you're actually a CFA charter holder, you can actually skip some of the sections or kind of have an expedited road path in becoming a CFP. Now, does this mean you can't be a financial advisor as a CFA charter holder if that's what you want to do? Certainly not. You can definitely be a financial advisor as a CFA charter holder. That is definitely a career path. Now, the reason why I'm talking about the CFP and being a financial advisor is because that's really the focus. You can also be a paraplanner, but you're not going to be a CFP and then become a manager of a restaurant chain. That's not really, there's not really any overlap, or it's pretty hard to say there is a lot of overlap there. The other thing is CFP is really focused on individuals, not so much institutions. If we look at institutions, let's say you are a tax exempt institution and you have a 200-year horizon. Well, that throws out all the tax side of it. And that also throws out all the individual budgeting and saying, hey, let's plan for a vacation and have disability insurance. It's just not relevant to an institution. Institution is looking and saying, hey, they have portfolio management needs, and they're focused on comparing to a benchmark. It's very focused on the investment management component to that. So in this video, I only gave a couple comparisons, and there's a lot out there. So there's the CMT, there's the Kaya. We could compare CFA designation to the getting a PhD. There's a lot of comparisons out there, and if you're interested in some of those, leave some comments in the description, and maybe I'll add that on another video. But in this video, I want to kind of cover some of the real top ones that you see a lot of head-to-head. And I want to add is that, it doesn't have to be a binary decision, right? You don't have to be, CPA versus CFA or MBA versus, CFA charter holder. You could have both, right? So you could definitely have both. Now, you may not want to pursue and have this whole alphabet soup, right? Because now you're taking all this time to do that when you might not have time to do other things. Plus, a lot of these credentials, you have an annual membership fee. So now you have 20 different credentials behind your name. Now you got like all these membership dues that you're paying, which may not be very efficient, you know. And so that is something you might want to consider. But you know, as you go along your career path, you're gonna uncover and kind of see what naturally, you know, is the fit. Maybe it is a combination of multiple credentials. I mean, me personally, I have other credentials besides just being a CFA charter holder. So, you know, you will find what works in your career path. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like this video, I look forward to having you on the next one. Thanks so much.